am so happy to see all of you this morning. May 22nd, 2011 might just be a good day to start taking attendance here at All Souls. So take a look around you and make note of who's not here. Although I'm not sure whether a sanctuary full of Unitarians tells us much about whether or not the rapture actually happened yesterday or not. But we're celebrating anyway, aren't we? Celebrating anyway. So in honor of the rapture that wasn't, I would like to take a quick peek into the Gospel of John. All right? And remind you this morning of a little man named Nicodemus. See, Nicodemus was a Pharisee. And he was a member of the Jewish ruling council during the time of Jesus, and he is mentioned only in the Gospel of John. Now, before I went to seminary, I need you to know that I had really no clue about John. I didn't know anything about the Gospel of John. All I knew really was that John 3:16 was something that I saw regularly being held up at football games. In seminary, we mainly focused on Matthew and Mark and Luke. Because in these Gospels, Jesus' followers proclaim that Jesus performed miracles, but Jesus himself is much more mysterious in his replies about who he was or who he is. The differences between Matthew and Mark and Luke in comparison with John are so great, actually, that biblical scholars lean in the direction of the more historical Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But it is in John where Jesus is portrayed as speaking specifically to his own divinity, but only to a select group of people, only to his disciples. Now, the miracles in John are also different than the other Gospels, including raising Lazarus from the dead. And Jesus' teaching parables are not present in John. So John doesn't get much airtime in Unitarian sanctuaries, just to let you know, which I'm not actually sure why, because it does lend itself so beautifully to the myth, right? To the story, to the metaphor that was Jesus' life of getting outside of the law. But it is a particular, more fundamentalist interpretation of John that drives many people to feel the need to try and clarify your interpretation of Jesus in the grocery store or wherever you happen to be in Oklahoma. So, yes, I was talking about rapture, right? Yes. So I was reading about and wanted to share with you the story of Nicodemus. You see, Nicodemus was stuck. He was stuck. He found himself in quite a predicament. You see, he was an influential leader of his people of the time, but his people were being oppressed. They were being oppressed under the rule of the Roman Empire. And Nicodemus' Judaism told him that God loved the Jews and despised the Gentiles. Nicodemus' Judaism told him that if Israel would just straighten up their act and get right with God, God would oust all the Romans and set his people free so that they might seek revenge on their oppressors. But Nicodemus' people were not just fighting with the Romans, they were fighting also with themselves. They were angry at the Romans, but they were also angry with one another. And so we find Nicodemus looking for a new perspective. And it was then in John when we discover Nicodemus seeking out the counsel of a radical rabbi named Jesus. Now, Jesus tells Nicodemus in John, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again. No one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again. What does that mean? There are lots of people today who believe that they have a monopoly on what that means. But when Nicodemus hears this, here's what Jesus says to him. He himself, Nicodemus, responds with skepticism. He says, how can someone be born when they are old? Nicodemus asks, stuck in his literal interpretation. Surely they cannot enter a second time into their mother's womb to be born, he says. Well, certainly not. But what if being born again is when we break free of that feeling of being stuck? What if being born again is when we break free of that feeling of being tied down or chained up or in a rut? What if being born again is that feeling of being completely open to any and all possibilities? What if being born again is the feeling of being connected to everyone and everything? That feeling of being filled with the Spirit, some might say. Or maybe you might say, a feeling of purpose. Do you know what I'm talking about? All right, stay with me here because I don't have a big voice. You got to hold me up. If you don't know the feeling of being set free, surely you can identify with the feeling of being stuck. That grating feeling of being dissatisfied with how things are. You know what I'm talking about? Paralyzed in the present, either because the outcome of your future is completely unknown, or paralyzed in the present because you feel trapped in such a predictable rut that it feels like you couldn't possibly escape. You been there? When you feel as though you've tried every single thing and nothing has worked, and you're exhausted. It's those places in your life where you've given up or where you've settled. Maybe you felt stuck in a relationship or in a job. Or maybe you felt stuck in uncertainty, unable to make a choice with too many possibilities in front of you. Or maybe you've been stuck in someone else's narrative of your life. You been there? Let me tell you a story about two people who I think were there. Jeff and Lisa are a couple that I knew a long time ago. They married right out of college. They met their freshman year and seemed to be made for one another. They shared interests and friends and seemed to get along just fine. And Lisa told herself that Jeff was supposed to be the perfect husband. All of their friends were envious of their relationship. Well, their senior year, Jeff proposed and Lisa said yes. They did everything they were supposed to do. And actually, that was the problem. Lisa told me that the day of her wedding, she knew walking down the aisle that marrying Jeff was not right. And she did it anyway. Now, all this time they'd been dating, Lisa had not truly been honest with Jeff about her feelings and her dreams, about her insecurities. Not wanting to be negative and fearful of being rejected, she had sacrificed being real. She sacrificed being true to herself because she hadn't quite figured out how. Now, author Martha Beck writes, "Our hearts are imprisoned for just one reason. The only language they can speak is truth. Unlike the mind, which can be persuaded to accept the most bizarre ideas like the rapture's coming on May 21st, 2011, your heart tells it like it is, without bothering to be tactful or socially appropriate. Free hearts rock boats and break rules and do things that disrupt the system, whether that system is a dysfunctional family or a bloated bureaucracy or the whole wide world. As a result, she says, few of us speak the truth aloud. All our lives, we've been hearing things like, what are you thinking or feeling or saying or becoming? What you're thinking and feeling, who you are, is stupid or rude or scandalous or sinful or depressing or ridiculous or unoriginal. All the infinite variations on this theme convey one single message to us. Silence your heart or you will be rejected. Rejection hurts our little social mammal hearts. It hurts our little social selves so much that just the threat of it convinces most of us to cooperate even with our enemies. First, we go dumb, learning never to speak our deepest truths. Then we go deaf, incapable of even being able to hear our own souls. Now, Martha says, to release your heart, you simply reverse the two-step process by which you locked it up. First, you begin listening for messages from your heart, messages that you might have been ignoring since childhood. Next, you must take the daring, risky step of expressing your heart to the outside world. Now, it's lucky this process is so simple because it's so terrifying. Now, Lisa had not been listening to her heart. She was already caught up in the invitations and the announcement and the party, and she wasn't listening to her own heart. Now, after the ceremony, Lisa and Jeff began fighting more than they ever had before. Loud voices, slamming doors, throwing things. They both began to spend more and more time at work and less time at home. And both of them began to lubricate their time together with alcohol. Just before their 1-year anniversary, Lisa came to see me and said that she felt completely stuck. What we discovered together was that Lisa had never really ever been clear with Jeff about any of her feelings of doubt or discomfort. Her fear of rejection had trapped her into a relationship that fit a cultural narrative of what marriage was supposed to look like. But it did not fit her own story. Now, when Lisa finally had the courage to tell Jeff how she felt, Jeff turned a deaf ear to her pain and her struggle and refused to go to counseling. So instead of them both getting real with one another for what could have been the very first time in their relationship, for the very first time they could have spoken heart to heart, they decided that they could not work it out from where they were and instead chose to divorce. Lisa was living someone else's version of her story that she could no longer bear. Now, it is in these difficult times when I love the metaphor of being born again, of shedding our old skin and becoming a better us than we ever could have possibly imagined. Now, I'm happy to report that Lisa has gone on to marry a second time and has been in that very open and honest relationship for a long time. Now, this is not to say that the only outcome should be divorce. It's too bad that they couldn't get real with one another. Now, another way of feeling stuck in someone else's narrative about our lives is when we feel stuck in someone else's theology, in someone else's religion. When we become aware that the religion that we're being offered is not large enough to contain all of who we are. When we let other people label our experiences of the holy that are confining and narrow. For most people, the recognition that we're stuck, whether it's a career situation or a broader life situation, creeps up on us rather than presenting itself suddenly. For most people, it comes through a sort of feeling first that they can't identify, a feeling of being frustrated, maybe even a feeling of being in a persistently bad mood, a lack of energy, a lack of passion, a lack of connectedness, despondence. And along with that, typically comes, at least for most people, the idea of self-blame, a feeling that there is something wrong with us. Now, if we can keep from internalizing this problem and realize that our feeling of being stuck is actually a reaction to the change process. If we can keep from blaming ourselves long enough to see that we are actually on the edge of change, we can gain the traction that we need to move forward. Sometimes breaking away from feeling stuck takes creativity, taking the lid off of the box that we've put ourselves in or that someone else has put us in. The kind of feeling stuck that I'm talking about is persistent. Maybe the place in your life where you are stuck feels like a rock in your shoe that you're trying to ignore. And you just keep on walking along, even though every single step is painful or irritating. I heard a wonderful story the other day about a woman who was at a charity event that was raising money by selling Oprah Winfrey's clothing. There were all kinds of clothes in all kinds of sizes, because God bless Oprah Winfrey, she has been many sizes. Anyway, this woman was in the middle of her own stuck experience, and she was volunteering at this charity event. She actually couldn't even afford to go, but she was there. And she was at a crossroads in her life. She'd lost her job, and she was not sure what she was being called to do in the world. And she saw this pair of shoes. Now, I'm not trying to say that buying a pair of shoes is going to fix everything, so let me just put that up front. But she saw this pair of shoes, and she was drawn to this pair of shoes. And so she bought this pair of Oprah Winfrey's shoes at this charity event, fairly inexpensive pair. So these were a pair of shoes that Oprah had once worn. Now, they were a size 10, and she was just a size 7, but it didn't matter. Something drew her to buy these shoes, and over the next few months, when she was trying to sort out where she was in this stuck place, she tried something extremely creative. She would wake up in the morning and do one thing differently. She would put on Oprah Winfrey's size 10 shoes and walk around her house in the morning while she was getting ready to go for her interviews. Just imagine that, right? She did something differently than she had ever done before, and it helped her. That one small thing helped her sort through her situation and get clear about what she wanted to do in her profession. Standing in Oprah Winfrey's shoes inspired her to go back to school. Now, ironically, standing in Oprah's shoes helped her to believe she could stand on her own 2 feet. Sometimes it just takes getting creative and doing one small thing differently than we have ever done before, and let it shift our entire experience. You know, if we could just embrace our stuckness, be more gentle with ourselves when we find ourselves in those stuck places. There is this sculpture that I'm familiar with that's called Surrender. And it's of 2 walls, and in between the wall is this man, and he's pushed up against the wall, his back against the wall. He's folded up in almost the fetal position with his feet pushing on the other wall. And all he needs to do to get out of that position is relax, is to let go. Sometimes when we relax and take care of ourselves and quit forcing the issue, clarity comes as a gift. Most importantly, let me suggest that the feeling of being stuck is actually a wonderful thing. Feeling stuck means that you have become aware in your mind and your heart of an acceptance of mediocrity in some area of your life. I'm going to say it again because I think it's important. Feeling stuck actually means that you have become aware of an acceptance of mediocrity in some area of your life. So many people have accepted mediocrity. It's as though they're just sleepwalking through certain areas of their life. That feeling of being stuck is our body telling us that it is tired of being walked on, that it is tired of being passive, telling us that it's time for us to carefully and deliberately and intentionally do something different, feel something different, telling us that it is time to ask for help. or time for us to accept the help that has been offered to us already. Feeling stuck means that we are aware that if we keep doing what we've always been doing, we're going to keep getting what we've always gotten, right? Feeling stuck means we're being called to do something differently, that we are on the precipice, that we are on the verge of doing something about it. Now, sometimes we need help getting clear because we can sink in that spot. Someone else to help us see that it is from this fertile ground of stuckness, of awareness of our stuckness, that will make us have a significant change. It is from this place that we can find what is truly meaningful to us, what is truly valuable, what we're passionate about. Feeling stuck is a natural part of change. So just relax in it. We don't have to put on Oprah's shoes to have our own aha. You might want to take the pebble out of your own shoe, though, if it's in there. Now, I've come to realize that for me, no matter how hard I try, if I have gotten myself stuck, I cannot think my way out of feeling stuck. I have to pray my way, or I have to feel my way, or I have to do something differently, act my way out of being stuck. Take one small, simple change and do it. If it is life's circumstances that have me stuck, then taking one small step that is within the realm of my power is often the key to getting unstuck. So the next time that life stops you in your tracks, in traffic, for example, pay attention to how you respond, because it's likely going to show up in other areas of your life as well. When you're stuck by life circumstances like traffic, for example, do you add to the problem? I know I'm not the only one. Do we, in fact, make it worse? Oh, I have been there. Or do we see it as an opportunity to pray for the other drivers in the road? An opportunity to daydream about our heart's desires and what we might do about it today. An opportunity to get present with ourselves as we learn to live paying attention to our stuckness as an opportunity and being true to our own feelings. Every choice we make becomes another way of telling our story, of calling other people to us who also talk from their own hearts. So finding your tribe and liberating not only our heart, but the hearts of others. Maybe this is what Jesus means by being born again. We cannot see the kingdom when we are stuck. Our future is unknown. We are blind to the possibilities before us unless we are born again, unless we are freed from settling with mediocrity. Being present and awake, feeling connected with a sense of purpose, is what makes all two human people and societies capable of true humanity. Paying attention to where you are stuck will chart you a life's journey as unique and authentic as your own fingerprint. And with a bit of creativity and a little bit of risk, it will send you out full of hope and breathtaking exhilaration onto paths you never thought you could travel. Being born again. It's the way we were meant to exist, where we're born again and again and again and continuing to grow every time we feel stuck, opening ourselves up to a new paradigm, a new possibility. If you stop to listen, you'll realize that your heart has been telling you so all along. Now, Nicodemus was stuck. And although he questioned Jesus' call to be born again, he realized that in order to get out of his rut and get into a groove, he had to do something differently. Maybe we can learn from Nicodemus by asking the question, is this life that we are living right now what God intended? Is this life we are living right now the one God intended? Or if you don't like that language, is this the life our hearts call us to live? If it's not, then I ask you to do one thing within your power today, not this week, today, to change it. Take a breath, speak from your heart, seek help, take the help that's been offered to you. Make the phone call you've been putting off, do the research you need to do. Treat yourself like you would your best friend. Put on a new pair of shoes, or at least stop long enough to take that rock out, like I was saying. Do something, one thing differently today. We don't have to wait for the rapture to live our lives unstuck. We can create the kingdom of heaven right here on earth for ourselves and for our world. Blessed be.